Good morning and welcome to another session in our Emerging Risks interview series, where we focus on recent developments, financial services, technology, and regulatory changes, and bringing professionals in the field directly to you to hear their perspective. My name is Casey Nelson, and I am the Senior Director of Training Solutions here at ACFCS, where we focus on bringing relevant information to help educate and benefit compliance professionals around the world. Today, I'm happy to be joined with Kim Lacey, the Chief AML Officer at KeyBank, to talk to us a little bit more about sanctions and how it might be more than just complying with sanctions. So we're excited to get into this topic today. Thank you, Kim, for being here with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Casey. Thank you so much for having me. And I should start off by saying that any views I present today are my own. They are not the views of KeyBank.
Well, thank you so much, Kim, for being here. And I'm excited to hear more from the perspective of an AML officer at a bank and the immense amount of responsibilities that you have. I'm excited to see your firsthand views. So as we were talking a bit the other day about the sanctions on Russia because of the crisis in Ukraine, and really you see that the US as well as other countries reacting unanimously, applying these sanctions on Russia. You mentioned that it's more than just complying with sanctions. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Sure. Thanks, Casey. I'll start by saying that the geopolitical environment that we're finding ourselves in right now is really unlike any, I think, that we've experienced before. And I say that because the intersection between Russia and the global economy and the U.S. economy is far more extensive than other countries who we have had struggles with in the past. Russia is not the same as North Korea, for example. And so that does create some pretty immense challenges. Obviously, we're all seeing it on the TV at night. And witnessing the human tragedy, which is just absolutely soul-crushing. And the world's response to that tragedy has been to very much unite and pull together and impose sanctions, impose restrictions on Russia's ability to continue to participate in the global economy. But a lot of focus has been around the sanctions area, which is perfectly appropriate. Ensuring compliance with the four corners of the sanctions is absolutely critical. But one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind as financial crimes professionals is that it does go beyond the four corners of sanctions. When we're thinking about the environment that we're finding ourselves in now, we need to be thinking more expansively. We need to be thinking about KYC. We need to think about beneficial ownership. We need to think about transaction monitoring and how we are investigating and SARing customers who have a certain nexus with Russia that creates risk for our country or for the global economy. And so, in that respect, when we're thinking about things like transaction monitoring, really trying to be thoughtful around, where do we find ourselves today? How are we currently configuring our systems? Are they appropriately configured to surface the evolving risks that we're now seeing in front of us? So I'll pause for a minute and see if there were any questions or anything you'd like me to further expound upon.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think you hear a lot in the news about the impact that the sanctions have on Russia and mainly the elite and the wealthy. You hear oligarchs and other wealthy individuals in Russia. And you hear a lot about that they have been preparing to deal with sanctions from the U.S. and other countries for many years, and maybe hiding wealth in different areas. And I think this really shines a spotlight on our ability to trace the source of funds or the source of wealth of our clients, and really understanding their history and their activity and performing that due diligence. And you mentioned how important that
Absolutely.
is for like KYC programs. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the expectations that this type of and what impact this has on KYC programs.
Sure, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Where we find ourselves today is not a surprise. It's not a surprise to anyone. The Russian elite have had years to prepare for this. I would say ever since, the invasion of Crimea back in 2014. And then, I think that, when we first started placing sanctions on Russian oligarchs in 2018, once again, there was that huge shot across the bow. This is coming. This is coming. And so the Russian elite have had time. They've had an opportunity to try to figure out ways to get around detection by U.S. institutions. The beneficial ownership rule went into effect back in 2018. And, as it's currently crafted, it requires disclosure of beneficial ownership at the 25% mark and a controlling party. And then there are also a number of exclusions. I would anticipate that over the years, members of the Russian elite have taken advantage of some of the, I don't want to call them loopholes, but maybe loopholes in the current beneficial ownership rule, the CDD rule, to basically get around having to disclose their ownership interests. I think we saw it back in 2018 when we saw all of a sudden, someone had an interest at 25%, and then the next day it's 24.9%. Or our threshold's 10% for our higher risk customers. Suddenly they're at 9.9%. Suddenly their equity has moved to convertible debt. And so there are a number of ways, and the way that the rule is currently configured, there are ways to get around it. And so we need to be very thoughtful about how can we address those vulnerabilities. How can we ensure that we are surfacing them? And so, being thoughtful around things like private equity funds, pooled investment vehicles, where there's currently that exclusion for. How do we get comfortable that those vehicles have appropriate programs in place to surface a member of the Russian elite who has, created a shell company in BVI or Cyprus and has moved their money through that to get it into the U.S. financial system through a private equity fund. And so those are places where I think we all need to be thoughtful in figuring out how do we dig deeper within our existing book. How do we ask the right questions of any new customers who are onboarding to make sure that we're surfacing, how did you evaluate your investors who are coming in? What geographies are they coming in from? And if you see Russia on that list of geographies, you don't stop there, you dig deeper. Who are these people? What is their source of wealth? What is their source of funds? Do they have ties to Putin? And so these are all questions that I think, we all need to be thinking about. And then just generally speaking in the KYC space, thinking about, what other customers do we have who have that Russian nexus? And how do we ensure that we are comfortable with who they are and where their funds are being sourced from? Looking at things like citizenship, permanent residency for companies, looking at, country of organization, where are they headquartered, where do they have significant business operations. Those are all customers who you're going to want to make sure you have a very firm understanding of and a very robust diligence file on.
Yeah, that is excellent advice. And I know compliance professionals, they have to know this. They live this every day. But even more so in this situation for that first line of defense, I think the key takeaway here is if you're involved in onboarding clients or creating or reviewing KYC profiles, due diligence is more important than ever. And it really helps to understand how legal entities are made and how these different investment vehicles can be considered higher risk, and to really understand who's involved. I think that really brings
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, that brings it to that important bottom line.
Yeah, and there's a lot of focus in the sanctions space on the 50% rule. If the entity itself is more than 50% owned by a sanctioned person or entity, then that brings that entity into the sanctions. And then there's also a lot of focus on the 25% rule for beneficial ownership. But I think we need to think more broadly about it, because if you have a sanctioned person who has managed to get their money into a vehicle, even if it's at 1%, that 1% is blocked. That 1% is absolutely blocked. No distributions should be going out on that 1% interest. That 1% is blocked property. And so if you are banking the vehicle, the magic question to ask is, how are you ensuring that blocking is taking place appropriately? Because as an institution, you would not want funds flowing through you that are ultimately ending up in the hands of a sanctioned individual. And then I'll also, point out the SAR filing obligations as well, because you're obviously going to want to make certain that you're filing SARs on this sort of stuff, so that you can alert the United States government that this interest is out there.
Excellent advice for our financial crime professionals. I think better safe than sorry. It couldn't hold more true now. But so with this type of pressure that we see being placed on Russia, and our discussion around methods for circumventing sanctions, methods for hiding your source of wealth in different investment vehicles, what do you foresee happening over the next several months as Russia attempts to try to get around these blockades that have been put in place? Do you see different activity that you expect?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, Casey, because and I think all of us who are financial crimes professionals have seen this over the years. It is whack-a-mole. As soon as you whack it here, it's going to pop up someplace else. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're already hearing a lot about movements to crypto, looking at countries that are favorable to Russia. And so one of the things that we're, sort of exploring is, drawing a ring around customers who historically have had material transactions with Russia, and then taking that discrete group of customers and saying, okay, now do we suddenly see a shift? Do we see crypto being used where it was not used before? From a monitoring perspective, coming up with, very focused monitoring to try to surface this activity. And another thing would be looking at, countries that are friendly to Russia. If your customer used to do business with Russia, and now suddenly you're seeing kind of the same amount of business being done with China, you probably need to be asking a question and probably filing a SAR. And so, we tried to create sort of a list of countries who we would want to be on the lookout for changes in behavior with that discrete customer population. The countries that we chose, a good starting place, candidly, is the UN vote, taking a look and seeing which countries voted with the United States, which countries abstained, and which ones voted with Russia. Anyone who abstained or voted with Russia, I think that's a pretty good indicator that, that's a country that you'd want to keep a lookout for.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. That's excellent advice. And with someone as experienced with you in the role that you're in, it's very helpful that you're giving some people your perspective on how behind the scenes you have to read and react, so to speak, and be able to adapt to these emerging risks and these sanctions on Russia. So thank you so much for being here with us today. This I think this is going to be very helpful for our community. Bottom line, when the sanctions are put in place, your screening methods are just the first step, and you have to have a program that is able to assess the risk associated with your clients. I think we're all realizing the importance, if we hadn't already, of beneficial ownership and the complexities around investment and legal entity formations. But thank you so much for your time today, Kim. And we hope to have you back on another session in the future. You've always been a great speaker for us. Anybody that is interested to hearing more about training that ACFCS offers, please visit our website. And as a member of our association, you have access to more training material that focuses on bringing you this recent and relevant information from professionals like yourself, Kim. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Casey. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you all for your attention to our association, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Have a great day.